Okay, hello. This is an attempt to outline a method of, you could call it group cognition, which is just a fancy way of saying people getting together to come up with decision making and to learn from each other. That's a good enough title. Basically, I'm looking for a means by which, rather than dividing between team A and team B and team C and such, we can figure out how to approach each other and understand each other better and be incentivized to agree with each other more often or more successfully. Okay, so there's three basic parts to this system. First of all, there is the structure. And the structure is basically going to be a means of organizing our ideas so that we can have not exactly a universal structure, but something like it. There's a whole, the other videos in my series on my channel about the Betterment Project have been attempts to create a somewhat rigid common structure, but I'm not worrying about that right now. All I'm going to worry about is that somebody has a concept. Maybe this concept is about a democratic process, a bill they want to do. Maybe it's about a philosophical idea. Maybe it's a scientific idea. Could be any kind of concept someone's working in. In my Betterment project, I usually call it a concept, but it's kind of confusing, I've discovered. So anyway, so you start with a concept. Next, you have a critique of that concept. This would be something like a single well-organized point, saying how the concept could be changed, what's wrong with it, how it could be improved. The buzzwords I'm looking for are complete and accurate. Is this concept complete or is it accurate? Now, in response to a critique, you can have a rebuttal. And a rebuttal is basically a way of saying, no, this is why you're wrong. And there could be several critique rebuttal cycles. There could be a critique of this, and then a rebuttal of that, and a critique of that. It could keep going on and on. But another way, instead of rebuttal, there could be absorption. This would be saying, you're right, let me change my concept to reflect that. The rebuttal would be saying, no, your critique is false. The absorption would be saying, okay, I see where you're coming from. I'm going to agree with that, and I'm going to integrate it. And lastly, I suppose I will say, although this is getting sloppy, you can, hopefully I'm spelling this right, you can innovate. And that means you're not rebutting it, you're not absorbing it directly, you're changing the concept, not as an absorption of the problem, not as a rebuttal, saying the critique is not valid, but by saying, I see that there's a problem there, we're going to come up with a new way of structuring this. So those are there's concept, critique, and the three ways you can respond to a critique. And all of these, the innovation could be critiqued, the absorption could be critiqued. Well, you didn't really absorb it. This can go on and cycle through. But the idea is primarily that you're cycling through and you're trying to get this concept as complete and accurate as possible. Then there is the voter. Voter is very simple. So anytime you have a concept, a voter can agree on it, or they can disagree with it by agreeing with a critique. Or if they don't agree with the concept, they might, the original concept, they might, how did I do that? Absorption to the critique. I guess the absorption would actually come up here. Yeah, sorry. So, yeah. So you could also agree with the innovation or with the absorption. All right. So, voters. The thing about the voters, though, is that not all voters have the same power or authority, or this is in some ways an attempt to be a methodology of, come on, brain, come on, starts with a C, credibility. This is basically a method of credibility. So a voter's, we'll call it a rank. Sorry. Rank equals points. So the more points a voter has, the stronger their vote is, or the higher their rank is. And this could be graduated. You could have an A, B, C, D, E, reverse that, an A level, B, C, D, E, F, whatever level. Or you could say it's on a sliding accumulative scale. You just keep getting incrementally stronger. Well, if we have points, we've got to have a method of assigning points. Points are assigned through contributions and that would be how many of these have you made, actually written out, or how many of those have you written out, or how many times have you written out a rebuttal or an absorption or an innovation? Have you actively participated in that, not just voted? You could get points for a resolution. A resolution is very difficult to achieve, actually. The idea of a resolution is that a concept is something like 95% agreed with. It is such a common idea that almost all the voters are voting for it. And keep in mind, it could be 10 high rank level voters and a slew of low level rank voters voting against it, and it would still be a 95%. Depends on how big the ratio is. I haven't said any of the ratios, the numbers, if you will, that you could plug into this in stone. I think I would have to actually have people using this system to decide exactly where to set those. 95%, I think, is a pretty good rank for resolution. If it's 95% resolved, then they get points for resolution. And again, how many points? That's some of the things you could tweak to see what's more effective. Okay. Common. This means how many other people are agreeing with you that this concept is valid or that the critique is valid. And this could be per concept. So this individual concept, how many people are agreeing with you? And so this would be a kind of a ratio. This will affect your rank by, so they're not just adding up points. It's not just a point tally. There could be algorithmic moves and shifts and ratios that cause you to shift in different ways. This structure should be able to be played with so that we can figure out what the maximal way is to use it. So per concept, or total concepts. So in other words, how many other people agree with you on your web of agreements, on all the things you voted for and agreed with? How many people agree with them? Is it just a few people agree with you? Well, you don't get many points. Is there a majority that agree with you? Well, then your rank goes up. And finally, you get points for helping with defragment. This is something, every concept is probably going to have, if this is a large database, let's say, then there are going to be times when you're going to have doubles and triplicates and stuff like that, or things that are almost the same. And if you are, so a defragment would be another line of critique that says, I think this concept is the same as this one over here, or they're so close we can combine them, or something like that. It is a way of simplifying. It may even be, well, it may even be improving this. I'm not sure about that. It could be. Never mind about that part. That's probably too confusing. Okay, so defragment is helping the overall database. And maybe we can have bots that do that kind of work, but it may always need to have somebody that helps with this. So right now, those are the 4 things I'm counting. Although I will also say that I think you need to have a balanced ratio of these 4. So you can't merely spend all your time. Well, it's actually, well, I guess this is voting, common votes. So you can't just go around voting where everybody else votes and up your tally, up your rank. That would be silly and easy and that kind of thing. You have to actually contribute. You have to actually try to resolve issues. You actually have to do a little bit of the defragment. Maybe less so that one. But the point is you have to be active doing all this stuff, not just voting, in order to contribute to your rank. So those are the 3 parts. Now let's see if I can show you how they work together. All right. You have a concept that a voter votes on, or maybe they have contributed in some other way. You have points calculated according to what's going on with all the voters, all the different voters. And then you have a assignment of points to the voters. And you can see how this will have a cyclical shift. You know, a shift here could cause points to be assigned, which would then further solidify or destabilize a concept, maybe resulting in points. So there'd be an interchange going on, and I've considered that there might have to be a time delay for that to like kind of work out. I'm not sure how. That's one of the bugs I think in the system is how often do we let them go through, or is there any kind of stopgap that needs to happen? But when you have this cycle going, and as this cycle creates, okay, I'll talk about stable real quick. This is what we're looking for more than anything else. A stable concept is one that would be something like, it would be complete and accurate. Which is we'll say it's consistent, is what that means. Sorry. All right. Consistent. And we'll say it is internally, meaning the ideas are rational, and externally, meaning there is reason to believe from observation that it is a stable category. In other words, that category has predictable, consistent results as we use them in real life. And finally, that it is consistently livable. I think this is an important addition. These two, you could basically say, science and reason, or logic or something like that. Livability, if you're familiar with John Vervaeke, this would be actually included in what he thinks of as reason. But it's basically the idea of, can I actually live this thing out? So what if it's internally consistent? So what if there's observations? Is this the way I want to live my life? Is this a good way to live? Do I feel fulfilled in it? Do people want to kill me when I do it? Is it livable? This is a very broad category, but it is an important one. However, I'll add this. This one's harder to judge than these two because there's a lot of different ideas that could plug in there. So of the three, this form of consistency is the hardest to get a common ground agreement with. But what we're looking for is a stable category here, concept here, that is at least these two. And let's say it's at least ethically livable. That is a horrible E, Matthew. And now it's smudgy. At least ethically. All right. Now, all of that, once you start building that and having stable categories emerge through resolution, this can be used not only to refine ideas and to build common agreement about ideas, to make sure everybody's thoughts have been aired, that the concept has been made complete. We haven't left anything out of it, and it's been made accurate. We have organized the parts of it in a way that seems as consistent as possible with reality and with livability. Okay. This can emerge into a kind of collective democracy. I don't know why I said collective there. I guess because I was trying to talk about cognition, collective cognition. Anyway, it's a form of democracy where instead of a representative, and I'm not saying we need to switch America over to this system or anything else. I'm saying any group could use this as part of their democracy. But it is a democracy that, rather than, well, I guess that's a good way of saying collective democracy. It is a way of, rather than having representatives who have all the ideas or an elite, this is a method that allows anybody to contribute. Now, not everybody will have the same status, the same rank, the same credibility. That's because you have to build your credibility by participating in the system and learning from other people. But as you do, then you can create a democracy, a democratic response to things. So one thing that likely will happen, oh my gosh. One thing that'll likely happen is that hey, I included that there. Okay. As resolution happens here in a concept, there may actually be factions, right? I mean, especially with this idea of livability, there will be factions that emerge that are interested in their paradigm, their worldview, and vote because of that. And we could argue endlessly, as people do, about whether someone's paradigm is rational or not. But so far as I can tell, we are biased creatures, and we are biased creatures because we are beings of need and want and social connection and social pressure, and we need each other, and we need Some of us need stability. Some of us need to be free of constraint. And those are kind of the two, amongst the two personality types, most at odds with each other. This idea of the person who wants to be free to say whatever they want and do whatever they want to do, and in so doing somehow liberate others from, or perhaps in so doing liberate people from other, from constraints. Then there are people that are like, I see way too much chaos in that constraint. I see harm being done unintentionally to oneself and to others. I'm pulling back into a more constrained belief system. And that, whatever that is, maybe it's atheistic, maybe it's theistic. But the point being is that this is intended to be a way people can try to agree with each other. And you'd probably have to say, okay, we're going to try to find common ground. That's the whole point of this process. We are going to intentionally try to, what's that word everybody's scared to do nowadays? When you decide to bend in order to find common ground. It is, we shall not, I apologize, my brain. People are often in the position of wanting to not bend, not give ground. And what this has done is simply caused combat. It has simply caused people to argue with each other more because no one will give ground. Am I saying you give ground on your most cherished beliefs? Well, that is a whole other topic, and I guess I'll have to go into it separately. Suffice it to say, there's going to be factions. And so one thing that factions will do, perhaps, is have regional dominance. So let's say you have, this is a very simple idea. Maybe it'll have to be contractual rather than regional. I know this is a messy deal. So your democracy can result in regional or contractual dominance. And the idea here is that, let's say we can't resolve our differences. We can't come to an agreement. We can't find common ground. We can just live with each other in a plurality, but there may be situations where people just will and refuse to do that. Signing a contract saying I'm going to live under these rules and you can live under those is one way to handle that. Moving to different regions is another. The problem with this one is that you get isolated bubbles. Contractual is more like there's a contract I hold with myself to just disagree with what I'm around, but to live in that area civilly, so that this contract would be one of civility, something like that. Of course, hopefully the region you're in is also civil to you. So those are the two ways I can see this resolving. Either way, this process, I think, is one that can elevate voices of reason. Let's go through some of the bugs, actually. So what are some of the bugs? One bug, I'll go back to this one. One bug is possibly, let's say somebody is just voting and voting and voting and voting. Let's say they're doing a minimal amount of work and then they're voting on everything that their group wants agreement with. So they're basically just kind of a shell, a follower, a camp follower. Why wouldn't that be a problem? Well, first of all, these contributions, whatever contributions they're doing here and here, are likely to be low quality, or they're already out there because, your contributions have to be original. They can't just be, oh, I made a concept called Joe. Joe is blue. Do you vote? Do you agree? So that doesn't count. That would be frivolous. The critique would knock that out. Hopefully some good, strong voters would see what was going on and knock it out. Another layer that might be necessary to all this is some kind of mechanism that alerts voters to what's happening. Say, hey, this category, this concept that you agree with is under attack. Or, hey, there's this new one that's getting a lot of hype. There's a lot of low-level voters participate in this. Why don't you go check it out, that kind of thing. There could even be points given for voters who help check in on things like that. That might fall under resolution or contribution in some way. Okay, so that's one idea, is that a kind of shell bot-style contributor, it seems to me, would not have much power. It's hard for me to even think about other problems. So you could talk about trolls. Well, what kind of activity is a troll going to do? I suppose they could make frivolous critiques, but then they're going to be rebutted. They are not. Okay, here's something. A critique only gets contribution points when the critique is agreed with over the concept. A rebuttal only gets contribution points when it is agreed with. Absorption, same with the innovation. You only get points if that becomes a common category. Or maybe we could play with that a little bit and say you get very few points for contributions that are low level, that are low agreed with, because we might not want to completely dissuade people from being active. But then again, even if you give a little bit, you could give power to a bot type of account. So I would suggest that these only get points when they are voted for and agreed with, and that they arrive at some level of resolution, of stability. And I think I had some other problems that could arise that would make this system unfair, but I think I'm just going to leave it at that. I hope that is interesting. I hope you will leave some comments or talk to me on Discord if you know where to find me, or comment down below. Thank you very much. Yes, I'm sure.